The night over El Paso felt wrong too, still too hollow. Even the neon lights along Alameda Street seemed to flicker like they were holding their breath. The desert wind carried dust across the empty pavement, mixing the smell of burnt oil, stale beer, and heat-baked concrete. And in that quiet, something moved. A German shepherd limped through the back alley behind a boarded-up pawn shop, dragging a broken leg that left streaks of blood on the ground. His ribs showed sharp under matted fur, his breath shallow and wet, but his eyes still burned. Not fear, not surrender, defiance. He wasn't running from anything now. He was running to something even if he didn't know what. One more step, then another, until his body gave out beside a dented dumpster, collapsing into a heap of dust and pain. His chest rose, fell, rose again. Instinct wouldn't let him quit, not yet. Then came the sound of boots. Heavy, steady, measured. Logan Pierce stepped off the curb at the corner of Alameda and Cotton, the desert night clinging to his skin. He hadn't planned on walking home. But when your head's full of ghosts, sometimes the road feels safer than sleep. The therapy session had gone long again. Memory recall, trauma mapping, exposure drills, all the things that made his pulse spike and his vision tunnel. Dr. Leland had called it progress. Logan called it bleeding without bullets. He tugged his jacket tighter and kept moving. The hum of a flickering beer sign buzzed above the silence. Then a sound. A bark. Short, strained, cut off too soon. Then the thud of a boot hitting flesh. Every muscle in Logan's body froze, the kind of stillness that comes from too many years in combat. He turned his head toward the alley, eyes narrowing. Another sound, a grunt. Then a muffled whimper. The kind that hits you right in the gut. He moved without thinking. Old instincts too old to die. The alley was narrow, littered with broken glass and trash bags split open by stray cats. And there, under the dying flicker of a cash for gold sign, stood a man. Gaunt, jittery, eyes wild from something stronger than rage. He raised his boot again. The dog on the ground didn't even flinch this time. Logan's voice cut through the dark like a warning shot. "Hey." The man turned, teeth bared, half a snarl, half a sneer. "You don't want to do that," Logan said. His tone was calm, but his stance wasn't. The man spat. "You don't know what this is, man. I don't care what it is." Then Logan moved. A flash of motion, his shoulder hit the attacker's ribs like a battering ram. Both men crashed into the crates stacked behind the dumpster, the clang echoing through the alley. The junkie swung back wildly. Logan caught his arm twisted, shoved him hard against the wall. "Walk away!" The man winced, gasped, then laughed. "This ain't over." He stumbled toward the street, vanishing into the dark. Logan stood still for a moment, breathing hard, his pulse pounding in his ears. Then he turned to the dog. The shepherd was lying on his side chest, heaving, one eye swollen shut. Blood soaked into the concrete beneath him, spreading slowly. A collar hung loose around his neck. No tag, just faded red leather and torn stitching. Logan crouched beside him. His hands were still shaking, but his voice came out steady. "You're safe now, buddy," he murmured. "You're okay." The dog's good eye found him. Clear, sharp, present. Logan slid his arms under the animal carefully. The body felt fragile but heavy, like carrying everything he'd been trying to forget. When he lifted him, the shepherd groaned once but didn't resist. Logan started walking. 3 blocks north, Sunridge Animal Clinic. The sign flickered blue against the desert night, a dying heartbeat in the city's silence. He pushed through the door, blood streaked across his forearms, and called out into the fluorescent light. "I need help," he said, his voice breaking the quiet. "Now!" He kicked it open with his boot. "I need help," he called out. A lanky teenager appeared from the back room, eyes wide. His hoodie was stained with iodine and marker ink, and a piece of masking tape on his chest read, "Caleb." "What the?" The boy dropped the clipboard. "Bring him here." Pierce laid the dog on the steel table. "Found him in an alley. Someone was kicking him to death." Caleb swallowed hard, voice tightening. "You're lucky you got to him in time. Or maybe he's lucky you did." He moved with quick confidence, checking vitals, palpating ribs, writing notes. "What's your name?" he asked, not looking up. "Pierce." "Logan. Pierce." "Well, Captain Pierce." Caleb said with a half smile. You just saved someone's best friend. Pierce didn't smile back. His hand rested on the dog's side, feeling each shallow rise and fall. He doesn't have a name, he said quietly. Then give him one, Caleb replied as if it were the simplest thing in the world. Pierce stared at the dog again, bruised, silent, still watching him. Echo, he said. His name's Echo. Morning arrived without fanfare. A dull sky stretching pale over El Paso's low skyline. Inside the clinic, fluorescent light hummed against white tile floors and the faint smell of antiseptic. Pierce sat in the corner of the exam room, his duffel bag at his feet, fatigue lining his face. He hadn't gone home. Dr. Lorraine Vega, the clinic's full-time vet, was in her late 60s, tall, spare, her silver hair tied in a knot. Her eyes, though tired, remained sharp behind thin frames. He's a survivor, she said earlier, listening through her stethoscope. Multiple old injuries, scar tissue, fractured rib, no chip. Whoever had him before, they didn't deserve him. Now, hours later, Pierce watched Echo breathe steadily beneath a blanket. The rhythm reminded him of something buried deep, the sound of another dog breathing beside him on a battlefield long ago. Titan. He swallowed hard. Titan had died, shielding him from the explosion that ended his career. Pierce hadn't let himself remember that moment until now. Echo shifted slightly in his sleep. The faintest sound left his muzzle not quite a whimper, more like a sigh. Pierce reached out, resting his hand lightly on Echo's paw. You're not alone anymore, he whispered. And in that quiet room where a soldier and a scarred dog fought to come back from the edge, something unspoken passed between them. Outside, dawn bled into gold. A new day in El Paso began, and for the first time in years, Captain Logan Pierce felt like it might be one worth living. I don't remember the last time I stayed awake through a sunrise. Usually the nights took more than they gave, hours of silence filled with noise only I could hear. But that morning at Sunridge Animal Clinic, as the desert light crept through the blinds, I watched it land across the table where he slept, the dog I'd pulled out of the alley. Echo. That was the name I'd given him. It still felt strange saying it out loud. He lay wrapped in a gray blanket, his side-bandaged chest rising slow but steady. Every now and then his ear twitched or his paw flexed like he was chasing something in a dream. Maybe he was running from it. God knows I'd done enough of that myself. Dr. Lorraine Vega came in just after 6. The door clicked softly and her boots made no sound on the tile. She had one of those faces you could never quite read, like she'd seen everything and decided most of it wasn't worth reacting to anymore. Still here, Captain? She asked. I nodded. My coffee had gone cold hours ago. He made it through the night, she said, adjusting the IV line. Most don't nod in his condition. I'm calling that a miracle. Yeah, I murmured. Guess we both got one. She glanced at me over her glasses, then returned to her notes. He'll need rest, fluids, small meals every few hours. And no surprises. Dogs like him, they remember. The body heals faster than the mind. I understood that better than I wanted to. When she left the room, fell back into its quiet rhythm, the soft beeping of the monitor, the hum of the old ceiling fan, the smell of antiseptic mixing with the faint desert dust coming through the cracked window. I sat beside him, elbows on my knees. You're tougher than you look, I said softly. Guess that makes 2 of us. His only reply was a faint sigh, but it was enough. Later that morning, Caleb Ortiz, the kid from last night, showed up with a cup of vending machine coffee and a smile too bright for someone who'd probably slept in a chair. You look like hell, he said cheerfully. Appreciate the honesty. He laughed. You military right. I nodded. Used to be. Yeah, I figured. You stand like one. Don't blink much either. My uncle was Army, same thing. Scared the crap out of telemarketers. That made me smile for the first time in days. Caleb leaned against the counter watching Echo. He's a good-looking shepherd under all that mess. You sure you don't want to keep him? I haven't kept much of anything lately, I said. Well, he said, shrugging, he picked you. That usually means something. He wasn't wrong. I'd seen it before, that silent moment when an animal decides you're worth trusting. You don't earn it, you just happen to be there when they stop running. Dr. Vega returned mid-morning with a clipboard and a tone that meant business. "He'll stay here 3 more nights," she said. "After that, we'll see if animal control wants him or if you do." Animal control. I frowned. "Policy," she said simply. "Unclaimed dogs, no ID, no chip. That's the process." I looked at Echo. Even unconscious, he seemed to tense like he understood. "I'll cover his stay," I said. "That's not what I asked." "I'll take him home," I added quietly. She studied me a long moment before scribbling something on her chart. "All right, Captain. You just got yourself a new mission." By the second night, I'd moved to a motel down the street from the clinic. The kind of place that rented by the week and came with a broken ice machine. The air conditioner rattled like a dying engine and the carpet smelled like bleach and cigarettes. But it was close, and that's what mattered. Every evening I'd walk to Sunridge, check on Echo, and sit by him until Dr. Vega kicked me out. Caleb started bringing 2 coffees instead of 1. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. We just sat there watching Echo breathe. There was something strangely grounding about it, like the world made sense again in that small, sterile room. By the 3rd morning, Echo tried to stand. His back leg buckled, but he growled not at me, just at gravity. That sound, rough, defiant, pulled something out of me I hadn't felt in years. Pride. "Doctor." Vega walked in, caught the scene, and nodded approvingly. "Stubborn," she said. "I like him." "He's earned his name," I replied. She looked at me curiously. "Echo, right?" "Why that?" I paused. "Because he reminds me of someone who didn't make it back." She didn't ask who. She didn't have to. That night when I finally left the clinic, the city had gone quiet again. El Paso has this way of holding its breath after midnight, as if the desert itself listens for something lost. I walked past shuttered storefronts, a diner still open for truckers, and a flickering street lamp buzzing like a wasp. When I closed my eyes, I could still hear him, the bark, the kick, the sound of bone against concrete. And under it all, another memory. Another dog. Titan. My partner back in Fallujah. He'd been my shadow, my sanity, my last line between chaos and the void. He'd saved my life twice before the blast. On the 3rd time, I couldn't save his. They never found his body. Just his vest torn and buried under debris. I'd told myself it didn't matter that he died instantly, no pain, no fear. But every night since, I'd wondered if he called for me before it hit. Echo stirred that memory like a shovel in sand, something long buried, now breathing again. I lay awake that night, listening to the ceiling fan creak and thinking how strange it was, the way life sometimes loops back, the way one echo leads to another. The next morning, Dr. Vega called. "Come get him," she said. "He's ready." When I arrived, Echo was standing shaky but upright, his fur still patchy, his eyes clearer. Caleb grinned. "Told you he'd make it." Echo looked up at me, ears twitching, then took one slow step forward. I knelt, and he pressed his head against my shoulder. No bark, no wag, just quiet weight. That's when I realized it wasn't pity that made me save him. It was recognition. 2 broken things somehow still standing. I brought Echo home on a Thursday. Home was a generous word for the 1-bedroom adobe I rented on the edge of El Paso's Barrio Viejo, a quiet neighborhood where the desert met the last cracked stretch of pavement before open land took over. The house sat low under a big sky wall, sun-faded and chipped. The air smelled faintly of creosote and dust. I hadn't let anyone inside for months. Now, as Echo limped in behind me, it felt less like a place and more like a second chance. He paused at the door, nose-twitching eyes scanning every corner. "Yeah, I get it," I told him. "Takes a while to trust walls again." He circled twice before lying down near the couch, keeping one eye on me. I left a bowl of water and a small dish of boiled chicken on the floor. He sniffed them cautiously, then began to eat slow, deliberate, as if each bite was earned. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of black coffee gone cold, watching the desert stars crawl across the sky. Somewhere far off, coyotes called in low, haunting howls. Echo lay beside me, his head resting on his paws. It was the first quiet we'd both had in years. The next few days fell into a rhythm neither of us had planned. He'd wake before dawn, always before me, padding softly to the window, sitting alert while I made coffee. He'd tilt his head toward the sound of distant trucks or the rattle of freight trains as if he were keeping watch. I tried to read sometimes, to write. Dr. Leland had told me journaling could help organize the memories. Most pages stayed blank. But Echo, he was changing fast. The bruises faded, his fur began to shine again, and the limp grew lighter. Yet at night, when the wind hit just right, he'd jolt awake, ears up, muscles tight, staring toward the back window. Always the same time. 2:11 a.m. The first night I thought it was nothing, a stray cat or a car door slamming somewhere down the block. But the second time I saw it too, the blinds shifting slightly like a breath of air that didn't belong. "Easy," I whispered, stepping closer. Echo's body was stiff tail, low eyes locked on the darkness outside. When I pulled the blinds aside, there was nothing, just the pale sand and the flicker of a distant streetlight. Still, Echo didn't settle for a long time. He just stood there watching. By the third night, I couldn't shake it. Every sound in the house felt amplified, the hum of the fridge, the pop of the cooling pipes, my own heartbeat. Around midnight, I gave up on sleep, poured another coffee, and sat at the table sketching random shapes into my notebook. Echo lifted his head once, then went back to dozing. But at 2:11 exactly, his head shot up. A deep growl rumbled from his chest, low, primal, protective. I followed his gaze. The curtain near the kitchen window rippled, not from wind, but from movement. In one motion, I grabbed the Glock from the drawer, an old habit that never died, and moved toward the sound. Echo was already there, growling in short, controlled bursts. Then something shifted outside, a shadow pulling back into the alley. The sound of feet on gravel. I yanked open the door, stepped onto the porch. The air was cold still. The desert always felt like it was holding its breath before dawn. That's when I saw it. A knife. A black-handled combat dagger embedded point down between two bricks near the window. A folded piece of paper pinned beneath it. My blood went cold. I crouched and pulled it free. Block letters in red ink read, "Stay out of it, Marine." By morning, I'd already made a call to the only person I trusted with something like this. Detective Harper Lane. We'd served together once, same unit, different paths. She'd left the military before Fallujah and joined El Paso PD. We hadn't spoken in almost 2 years, but she showed up at my door in under an hour. She looked exactly how I remembered, sharp, confident eyes that saw through excuses before you made them. "You look like hell," she said, stepping inside. "Heard you rescued a dog in an alley. Figured that had to be you, no one else dumb or noble enough for that combo." "Nice to see you too," I said. Her gaze landed on Echo, who stood beside me, head high but calm. "That him?" "Yeah. Name's Echo." She crouched, slightly studying him. "No tags, no chip?" "Nothing. Just scars." She frowned. "I've seen that look before. He's trained." I raised an eyebrow. "Trained? Watch his eyes," she said quietly. When I moved toward the door, he didn't flinch. He assessed. "He's not reacting out of fear. That's conditioning." I didn't argue. She was right. Harper turned toward the window, scanning the spot where I'd found the knife. "You said it was stuck between the bricks." "Yeah." Note said, "Stay out of it, Marine." "Someone knows who I am." "That's not random," she muttered. "You think whoever was beating him wants him back?" "Maybe. Or maybe they want him quiet." She looked at me for a long second. "You sure you're up for this?" "No," I admitted. "But I think he is." Harper smirked faintly, then handed me a card. "If anything else happens, call me directly. And keep the gun loaded. Always." As she turned to leave, she paused at the door. "You know," she said, "you look better than the last time I saw you. Whatever fog you were living in, it's lifting." She didn't wait for an answer before stepping out into the morning sun. After she left, the house felt heavier, quieter. Echo stood near the window again, head tilted, tail still. The note and the knife lay sealed in a plastic bag on the counter, evidence of something we didn't yet understand. I sat on the couch, rubbing the scar on my shoulder, the one that still ached when storms rolled in. Somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Whoever hurt Echo, whoever trained him wasn't just gone. They were watching. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone in the fight. Echo lifted his head, ears twitching, and looked straight at me. "You and me," I said quietly. "Guess we're in this together now." He didn't bark. He just pressed his paw against my boot the same way soldiers used to touch helmets before heading out on patrol. And for a moment, just a moment, I almost believed in peace again. The morning after Harper left, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd just stepped into something far bigger than either of us realized. Echo paced by the window again, nose twitching, eyes sharp. Every sound from outside, a car door slamming, a trash bin rattling, pulled his attention. He didn't bark, just watched. Calculated. I'd seen that look before in soldiers returning from the field, in the mirror after Fallujah. That mix of vigilance and exhaustion. Survival and memory. He wasn't just a stray. He was trained. That afternoon, I took him back to Sunridge Animal Clinic for a follow-up. Dr. Vega was already there, hunched over her desk, reading charts through her glasses. Caleb sat cross-legged on the floor beside a nervous beagle, whispering to calm it down. When we walked in, both of them looked up. "Back so soon?" Dr. Vega asked. "Yeah," I said, nodding toward Echo. "He's alert. Too alert. Thought you might check if he's chipped. Maybe we missed something." Caleb jumped up. "I'll get the scanner." Echo stood perfectly still as they ran the device along his shoulder, then down his spine. "Nothing." Dr. Vega frowned. "If he was ever registered, it's gone now. Either someone removed the chip surgically, or it was never there." "That doesn't sound like a street dog," I said. "No," she replied. "That sounds like a dog someone didn't want traced." The room went quiet. Even Caleb stopped fidgeting. Then Dr. Vega sighed, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "You know you're not the first person to bring in a shepherd like him. A few months back, a volunteer found one near the train yard. Same condition, same injuries. But he didn't make it. The collar had been burned off. Any idea where it came from?" I asked. She shook her head. "Animal control picked up the report. No follow-up. It's the kind of thing that slips through the cracks in this town." Echo shifted beside me, tail low, ears twitching. His gaze followed every move Dr. Vega made. "Mind if I take a photo of his tattoo?" Caleb said suddenly. "Tattoo?" I repeated. "Yeah." Caleb knelt by Echo's hind leg and gently brushed the fur aside. "Here, look." Barely visible beneath the short hair was a faded mark, a series of small letters and numbers half erased by time. K92V. Dr. Vega leaned closer. "That's not random. That's a unit code." A cold pulse ran through me. Military. Possibly. Or private security. I'll make a note. Maybe someone in the rescue network can cross-reference it. I crouched beside Echo, tracing the edge of the faded ink with my finger. He didn't pull away. He just looked at me like he'd been waiting for someone to notice. That night, the house felt heavier than usual. I poured whiskey into a chipped mug and sat by the kitchen table, the lights dimmed low. Echo lay near the doorway, eyes half closed but never fully asleep. On the table lay my old field journal, the one I hadn't opened since the hospital. Its pages smelled like dust and smoke. I flipped through until I found the section I'd avoided for years. The mission logs, the K9 units. That's when I saw it. Unit designation K92V Fallujah 2010. Titan's tag had carried the same prefix. My pulse quickened. I flipped another page, found the last entry before the explosion. Patrol with Titan. Intel intercept. Possible arms cache near Route Alpha. Engage at 2300. I remembered everything about that night, the heat, the radio static, the scent of diesel in the air. Titan had alerted first. A low growl, the kind that meant trouble. Then the flash, the blast, the soundless void that followed. And now, years later, a different shepherd bore the same mark. Coincidence? Maybe. But I'd stopped believing in coincidences the day Titan died. The next morning, Harper called. Her tone was clipped but urgent. "You home?" "Yeah." "Don't move. I'm on my way." She showed up 15 minutes later, plainclothes, hair tied back, badge clipped to her belt. She didn't bother with greetings. "I pulled some files," she said, dropping a folder on my table. 3 other shepherds have turned up in the last 4 months, all with similar injuries, all unchipped. 2 dead, 1 missing from animal control custody. I flipped through the photos, bruised bodies, shaved patches where chips should have been numbers barely visible on the legs. Same pattern. Same code. Whoever's doing this, she said, is either training these dogs or breaking them. Maybe both. Why? Smuggling. Courier runs. Underground fights. Some of them get sold overseas for protection work. She paused. And the rest? They get buried in the desert. I stared at the photos again. You think Echo came from the same place? I don't think, she said. I know. She pointed at the code on the report. K92V. There's chatter about a training facility outside Sierra Blanca. On paper, it's legit Coal Defense K9. But off the record, dogs disappear from there. No refunds, no records. Cole, I repeated. As in Damien Cole. She nodded grimly. You remember him? Yeah, I said. He trained dogs for private contractors after Iraq. Got discharged for abuse allegations. Guess he found another way to make money. Harper exhaled slowly. Look, I'm digging deeper, but we'll need proof before I can move on it. If Echo really came from there, someone will come looking. They already have, I said, nodding toward the plastic bag on the counter, the knife and the note. Her eyes darkened. Then you need to watch your back. I'll watch his too. That night I couldn't sleep. The desert wind pressed against the windows like a restless spirit. Echo lay near the door again, tail flicking whenever the wind shifted. I reached down, scratching behind his ear. Guess we're both haunted, huh? He tilted his head, eyes reflecting the faint glow from the streetlight. There was intelligence there, not just obedience. A memory. You were trained to serve, I said quietly. Then they threw you away. He pressed closer, resting his chin on my boot. The weight of it was grounding, a reminder that the living still existed. Outside, thunder rolled over the desert, soft and far away, the kind of storm that never reaches the ground. I took another sip of whiskey and stared into the dark. Somewhere out there, someone had made dogs like him suffer. Someone who thought loyalty was just another weapon to exploit. I'd spent years trying to forget my own ghosts, but this fight felt different. It felt like purpose. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes. Titan's amber eyes in the dust of Fallujah, the explosion, the ringing silence. And now Echo lying on the floor by my door, breathing slow but restless. I'd spent years trying to escape ghosts. Now one was sleeping in my living room. By morning, I knew what I had to do. Harper was already at the precinct when I called. I'm heading to Sierra Blanca, I told her. Don't, she said instantly. Cole's operation is private property. You show up there, you'll spook him. Maybe that's exactly what I want. Logan, but I'd already hung up. The drive out of El Paso stretched endless under a pale desert sky. The land turned flat open and silent, sand and rock rolling toward the blue-gray mountains on the horizon. I'd made drives like this before, convoys through Iraq, the same kind of emptiness, the same kind of tension. Echo sat in the passenger seat, head out the window, ears twitching in the wind. He looked peaceful for the first time since I'd met him, and that peace was almost enough to make me turn back. Almost. The coordinates Harper had mentioned led me to an old service road cutting through scrubland. The dirt track ended at a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. Beyond it stood a cluster of low buildings, prefabs painted tan and sun-bleached to white. A sign half buried in sand read, Coal Defense K9 Training Facility. The gate was locked, but the padlock was new. Fresh tire marks cut through the dust. Someone was home. I parked half a mile back and moved on foot, sticking close to the fence line. Old habits never die, they just wait for the next mission. Echo followed quietly, staying low, eyes sharp. Through the fence, I saw training fields, obstacle courses, bite sleeves, kennels. But something was off. The kennels were too quiet. Then I saw them, a row of empty cages, doors hanging open, chains cut. A few still had collars on the ground, burnt or bent. My chest tightened. I crouched near the fence, pulled out my phone, and snapped a few photos. The sun glared against the metal heat, shimmering in waves. That's when I heard it. Engines. A black pickup truck rolled across the dirt lot, kicking up dust. 2 men stepped out, both armed, both scanning the perimeter. Echo stiffened beside me. His ears pricked, body tense, waiting for a command I didn't give. The men walked toward one of the prefab offices. One of them wore a black ball cap. Even from this distance, I could see the brand stitched across it, CDK9 Cole's initials and company mark. I moved back quietly, keeping to the shadows. That night I sent the photos to Harper. She called 2 hours later, voice low. "You weren't kidding. Those cages match the description from the animal control case. I'll need a warrant to get inside." "How long? 2, maybe 3 days?" "We don't have that long," I said. She hesitated. "Logan, what are you planning?" "Whatever it takes. Don't do anything stupid. Stupid's been keeping me alive for years." I hung up before she could argue. The next day I went to see Caleb at the clinic. He was cleaning kennels when I walked in, earbuds and head bobbing to some muffled beat. When he saw me, his expression dropped from cheerful to concerned. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Need a favor?" He wiped his hands. "Sure, what kind?" "I need a DNA swab from Echo." "You still have access to the university lab?" Caleb blinked. "Yeah, through Dr. Vega." "But why?" "Just do it. Quietly." He must have seen the look in my eyes because he didn't argue. "All right, Captain. You got it." Echo stood still as Caleb swabbed the inside of his cheek. The kid sealed the vial, labeled it, and tucked it into a small padded envelope. "I'll rush it," he said. "But whatever you're into, be careful, okay?" I nodded. "You too, kid." 2 nights later, the call came. I was sitting on the porch watching lightning flicker far off over the desert when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Pierce," I answered. The voice on the other end was female professional. "Captain Logan Pierce. This is Dr. Moreno from the Federal Canine Registry. We ran the DNA sample your clinic submitted." My heartbeat quickened. "And?" "There's a match. The dog in your care corresponds to records for a canine designated K92V, codename Kilo, assigned to the U.S. Marshal Service Task Force 9 San Diego Division." I froze. That can't be right. "He was presumed killed in action during a narcotics raid 2 years ago. Explosion at a warehouse. No body recovered." My grip tightened on the phone. "You're saying my dog is a federal K9 who's supposed to be dead?" "That's correct." She paused. "Captain, how did you come into possession of this animal?" I looked at Echo lying by the door, head lifted, watching me. "By accident," I said quietly. "But I don't think he was meant to survive." After I hung up, I just sat there for a long time, the desert wind pushing against my shirt, the night alive with distant thunder. It made sense now, the scars, the discipline, the way he moved when danger came close. He wasn't just a survivor. He was a soldier. A soldier someone had tried to erase. Harper arrived at dawn, hair still damp from the shower, coffee in hand. I didn't say anything, just handed her the printout from the registry. She read it, eyes narrowing. "Kilo," she said. "So that's who he was?" "Yeah. And the people who trained him want him gone." She set the paper down. "This changes everything. If Cole got his hands on government-trained dogs, he's selling classified assets," I finished. Her jaw tightened. "I can get a team together, but it'll take time. We'll need evidence that connects him directly to the stolen dogs." I nodded. "Then we make our own." That evening, I found myself back at the edge of the desert. The sun bled red across the horizon, the wind dry and sharp. Echo stood beside me, tail low, eyes fixed on something only he could sense. "You were never supposed to make it out," I said quietly. "But you did." He turned his head slightly, meeting my gaze with that same steady calm I'd seen in soldiers before a mission. Maybe we were both ghosts, remnants of lives the world had already written off. But ghosts still fight. And sometimes they come back to finish what others started. I rested a hand on his head. "All right, Echo. Let's find the man who tried to bury you." The desert wind picked up again, carrying dust across the fading light, and somewhere in the distance thunder rolled like a drumbeat of war. You can feel when a storm's coming in the desert. It's not the clouds or the thunder, it's the silence. The air goes heavy, the light fades to gold, and the world holds its breath, waiting for the first crack. That's how it felt the morning Harper and I drove toward Sierra Blanca. The highway stretched empty ahead of us, a pale ribbon cutting through endless sand and scrub. Mountains rose like bones in the distance. The hum of the engine was the only sound between us. Echo sat in the back seat, alert but calm eyes scanning the horizon through the open window. The desert wind caught his fur, carrying the faint scent of rain, the first in weeks. Harper drove her fingers, tapping lightly against the steering wheel. She hadn't said much since we left El Paso. Neither had I. Some silences don't need to be filled. Finally, she spoke. "I pulled a file on Cole," she said, her voice steady but low. "Former private contractor. Ran K-9 units overseas before he got blacklisted for cruelty and data theft. Moved stateside 6 years ago, bought 10 acres outside Sierra Blanca, registered as a defense K-9 training facility. And no one checked what he was really doing out there. People don't ask questions when the funding looks legitimate," she said bitterly. "Turns out patriotism makes a good cover for profit." I watched the horizon blur in the heat waves. "You think he still has more dogs?" She nodded. "If the pattern holds at least a dozen. Maybe more." Echo shifted in the back, a low growl rumbling from his chest. He could sense it, tension, danger, intent. Animals always know before we do. We reached the outskirts by mid-afternoon. The facility sat half a mile off a dirt service road surrounded by barbed wire and dry mesquite bushes. A handful of prefab buildings sat clustered around a yard filled with rusted training equipment, bite posts, chain link pins, and old barrels. It looked abandoned. Too abandoned. Harper parked behind a ridge overlooking the site. We got out, binoculars in hand. "Nothing's moving," she said. "Or they want us to think that." I crouched beside her, scanning through the scope. No guards, no vehicles, no dogs. Just stillness. Echo stood beside me, tail rigid, body poised. Then without a sound he sat, that strange alert stillness that only trained K-9s have when they detect something off. I felt my stomach tighten. He knows. Harper lowered her binoculars. Knows what? Trap. We decided to wait until dusk. The desert light softened from gold to rust, then to the bruised blue of twilight. Coyotes howled in the distance, long and lonely. By the time we moved, the air had cooled. Harper led, pistol drawn. I followed with Echo close behind his leash, loose, his body pressed low. We slipped through a gap in the fence where the wire had already been cut, old but clean. Inside, the air smelled of bleach and copper. Something had happened here. We passed the first building, empty kennels, sand drifting across the floor. Then another, cages stacked in rows, the walls streaked with old stains. Echo stopped suddenly, nose pressed to the ground. He whined softly. There was a scent there, old but familiar, fear blood and something metallic. I knelt, running my hand along one of the cage doors. The latch was new, recently replaced. "Harper," I whispered. She turned, and that's when the floodlights exploded to life. White light cut across the yard, blinding. A voice echoed through the loudspeakers, calm, composed, and chillingly familiar. "Captain Pierce," it said. "You should have stayed home." My pulse spiked. Echo barked once, sharp and loud. From the shadows behind the floodlights, figures emerged, 3, maybe 4 men armed. One held a flashlight, another a rifle. At the center of them stood Damian Cole. Even in the harsh light, I recognized him, late 50s, silver-streaked hair, slicked back posture of a man used to command. He wore a dark tactical vest and a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Still playing hero, I see," he said. "You should have stayed out of my business." I stepped forward, shielding Echo. "You turned trained dogs into disposable weapons. You made them fight, run drugs, die for money. That's not business, that's butchery." Cole chuckled. "Spare me the moral lecture. You of all people should know the government builds killers. I just sell them to the highest bidder." Harper raised her weapon. "You're under arrest, Cole." He smiled wider. "You think I didn't expect this?" Behind us, the sound of tires crunching gravel made my heart stop. A second vehicle. We turned just in time to see 2 more men closing in from the back entrance. They moved fast, coordinated. "Move!" Harper shouted. I ducked as the first shot cracked through the air, slamming into the metal siding beside me. Echo lunged forward, barking, teeth bared. We sprinted for cover behind a storage container. Dust exploded around us as bullets tore through the ground. Harper fired twice, hitting one of the attackers in the leg. He went down screaming. The others pulled back behind the trucks. "Back up," I shouted. 10 minutes out, she yelled back. "We don't have 10 minutes. Echo growled beside me. Hackle's raised eyes locked on Cole's silhouette. Cole's voice came again, calm as ever. "Give me the dog, Pierce. You and your friend can walk away. He's not yours." I wiped the sweat and dust from my face. "You're right," I muttered. "He's no one's anymore." Then I looked at Echo. His breathing was steady, his eyes bright. "Ready." He gave a low huff, the same sound Titan used to make before moving. "Go." Echo burst from behind the container like a bullet. He moved low, fast, silent, a ghost made of muscle and purpose. He hit one guard, hard teeth clamping down on his wrist before spinning to the next. I followed, firing once, twice, covering his movement. Harper advanced from the side, her aim precise and cold. Cole shouted something, but I didn't hear it over the chaos. The last guard dropped his rifle and ran. Then everything went quiet again, except for Echo's ragged panting and the ringing in my ears. When the floodlights finally cut out, all I could see were shapes, Echo standing between me and Cole, the desert wind carrying dust across the open yard. Cole raised his gun. "You should have left him where he belonged," he hissed. "Yeah," I said, raising mine. "So should you." Before either of us could fire, headlights swept across the lot. Sirens wailed in the distance, backup finally arriving. Cole turned, cursing under his breath, and bolted toward the main building. I ran after him. Echo followed. I chased Damien Cole through the dark, half-lit corridors of his compound, my boots echoing off the concrete. The lights flickered as I passed broken kennels and cages that smelled of bleached sweat and fear. Everywhere I looked, there were ghosts, claw marks on metal doors, chains still hanging empty bowls on the floor. Echo stayed at my side, limping slightly from the earlier fight, but still pushing forward. Every few steps he growled low and focused, like he could smell the man ahead. "Easy," I whispered, but my own heartbeat was hammering so hard I could barely hear myself. Somewhere ahead, a door slammed. Then silence. We reached a long corridor leading to a storage bay. A single light swung from the ceiling, casting lazy shadows across the floor. "Cole!" I shouted. My voice bounced off the walls. "It's over!" A voice came back, calm, steady, cold. "No, Captain Pierce. It's just beginning." Then something hit me from behind, hard. The blow sent me crashing to the ground, my weapon skidding across the floor. Before I could reach for it, a boot came down on my wrist. "Should have stayed home, soldier," a man snarled, one of Cole's thugs. Echo lunged. His jaws clamped down on the man's forearm, and the scream that followed filled the whole hallway. The guard kicked, twisting in pain, and Echo didn't let go until I rolled to my side and grabbed my gun. One shot. The man dropped. But before I could catch my breath, I heard Echo yelp, sharp, sudden. A taser cracked behind me. "No!" I turned too late. Echo convulsed as another man jabbed the taser again, electricity snapping against his ribs. He went down hard, whining through clenched teeth. "Stand down!" Captain Cole's voice boomed from the shadows. "Or he dies." I froze, gun still raised but useless. Two more men stepped out, rifles trained on me. Cole walked between them, pistol in hand, the same smug calm on his face as before. "Drop it," he ordered. My arm trembled, but I let the gun fall. It clattered against the floor. Cole gestured. "Tie him up." They zip-tied my wrists, pushed me to my knees. Echo lay a few feet away, breathing hard, his body twitching from the shock. Cole crouched beside him, running a gloved hand through his fur. "You know I spent 2 years perfecting this one. Cost me a fortune when he disappeared. Smart, loyal, unbreakable. Until you showed up. You used him," I growled. "You broke him." He smiled faintly. "No, Captain. I made him what he was always meant to be, a weapon. And you just brought my weapon home." They dragged us into the main hangar, a wide, empty space lit by a single hanging bulb. Echo was chained near one wall, still dazed but conscious. His breathing was shallow, his eyes half open but locked on me. Cole paced slowly in front of me, hands behind his back. "You think I'm the villain in this story, don't you? But you and I were not that different. You trained dogs to detect bombs. I trained them to survive in a world that pays better. You turned loyalty into currency," I said through clenched teeth. You turned heroes into slaves, he smirked. Loyalty's a liability, Pierce. That's why men like us end up alone. The world doesn't care who we save, just what we can sell. I leaned forward, blood dripping from my nose. You're wrong, he chuckled. Am I? Then without warning, he lifted his pistol and aimed it at Echo. Let's test that theory. Something inside me snapped. I pushed off the ground, slamming into him with everything I had left. The gun went off, the shot ringing in the confined space, ricocheting off the metal beams. We crashed to the floor. He fought hard, stronger than I expected, but rage had given me strength I didn't know I still had. We rolled across the concrete, his elbow smashing into my ribs, my knee into his jaw. The gun slid away into the shadows. Echo barked once, loud, defiant. Then I heard it, the sound of a chain breaking. Cole froze. His eyes flicked toward the noise just as Echo barreled into him full force. The impact knocked Cole backward into a stack of crates. The crash echoed through the hangar. Echo growled, teeth bared, stance low, the soldier back in him fully awake. Cole tried to reach for the gun, but Echo was faster. He lunged, his teeth sinking into Cole's arm, the sound raw and final. I pushed myself to my feet, pain surging through every muscle. The fight was over. Cole lay gasping, the gun kicked away, his eyes full of hate and disbelief. You think this changes anything? He spat. There are more like him, more facilities. You can't stop all of it. I walked up, crouched down beside him. Maybe not, I said quietly, but I can stop you. He didn't smile again. When the police arrived, the sun was already rising over the hills. Harper was the first through the door, her face pale with relief and fury. Jesus, Logan, she breathed, running up to untie me. You couldn't wait 10 minutes for backup. Didn't have 10 minutes, I said, voice hoarse. Her gaze shifted to Echo, who stood beside me, chest heaving but eyes alert. She smiled faintly. Guess he didn't either. Paramedics took Cole away on a stretcher, muttering about blood loss and nerve damage. Harper walked me outside as the first light of dawn spilled across the desert. You realize you just brought down one of the biggest illegal canine operations in the Southwest, she said. Yeah, I replied, but it wasn't me. Echo limped beside me, head held high. We stood at the edge of the compound, the air cool and quiet now. The chaos behind us felt distant, like a dream fading at sunrise. I looked down at Echo. He was staring east toward the rising sun. You did good, I said softly. You're free now. He looked up at me, tail flicking once as if to say, not without you. I crouched beside him, resting my hand on his neck. His heartbeat was strong, steady, alive. In that moment, everything went still, the noise, the fear, the years I'd spent running from ghosts. For once, there was only peace. A few hours later, Harper drove us back to El Paso. She dropped me off at the clinic where Dr. Vega and Caleb were already waiting. The kid's eyes widened when he saw Echo. He made it, Caleb asked. Barely, I said. Dr. Vega smiled. You both did. As she led Echo inside for treatment, I lingered by the door. My reflection in the glass looked different somehow, less like a man haunted, more like someone beginning again. The desert sun was brutal outside, the kind that burns away everything false. And for the first time in years, I didn't flinch from its light. It's strange, the things that stay with you after a war. The sounds, the smells, the way silence feels heavier than gunfire. For me, it wasn't the explosions or the screams that haunted me the most. It was the breathing, that quiet, steady sound of a dog at my side. Tighten then echo, now reminding me I was still alive. It's been a year since Sierra Blanca. A year since the night we walked out of that hell and into the sunrise. I thought the fight was over that morning. Turns out it was only the beginning. The city of El Paso gave us a medal, service, and valor in the face of danger. Harper made a speech. Dr. Vega cried. Caleb nearly passed out when he saw himself on the evening news. Echo just sat there calm as always, wearing a bandana someone had tied around his neck that said hero with 4 legs. He didn't care about the cameras. He only watched me like he always did, steady, waiting, loyal. After the ceremony, people started reaching out. Veterans, shelter workers, families who'd lost dogs to the same underground networks Cole had built. Letters came from across the country, some typed, some handwritten in shaky cursive, some with photos of dogs that didn't make it home. I read every one. And somewhere in the middle of it all, an idea started to grow. The first blueprint for Echo Haven Sanctuary was drawn on a napkin. It was Harper's idea to go big grants, permits, public support. Mine was simpler, a quiet place where broken things could learn to stand again. We bought the land 6 miles outside El Paso, an old warehouse surrounded by desert. The roof leaked, the paint peeled, and the walls smelled like oil and dust. But to me, it felt like possibility. Dr. Vega joined as our medical director. Caleb, now officially studying animal behavior at the community college, became our first staff member. Harper handled logistics, funding, and the endless paperwork that would have driven me insane on my own. And Echo. Echo became the heart of the place. He'd patrol the yard every morning, nose to the wind, tail slow and deliberate. The new rescues always noticed him first. They'd see the scars, the calm authority in his stance, and something in them would relax. If he could heal, maybe they could too. The first dog we took in was a golden mutt missing a leg. Caleb named her June. She'd been hit by a truck and left in the sun for 2 days before someone found her. The first week she wouldn't eat or look anyone in the eye. Echo just lay near her crate, not too close, just near enough. On the 5th day she ate. On the 6th she wagged her tail. By the 2nd week she followed Echo everywhere. We started calling them the patrol unit. Months passed. More dogs came, some limping, some terrified, some too old to trust again. But Echo met them all with the same calm, patient strength. He never barked at the newcomers. He just watched step close and sit. It was his way of saying, "You're safe now." Harper called him the best therapist in Texas. She wasn't wrong. The day we opened officially, I stood by the new wooden sign at the gate, Echo Haven Sanctuary for the Abandoned and the Brave. The desert wind carried the smell of mesquite and rain. Volunteers, neighbors, veterans, kids, they all showed up. Some brought flowers, some brought stories, some just came to see what hope looked like. Harper gave the opening speech, professional, confident, just emotional enough to make half the crowd tear up. When it was my turn, I walked up to the podium, feeling the heat of the sun on my shoulders. Echo sat beside me, calm and watchful. I cleared my throat, the microphone crackling slightly. 1 year ago I was sitting in a hospital bed with broken ribs and no reason to get up again. Then I met a dog who had every reason to give up and didn't. The crowd was silent. He had no name, no home, and no reason to trust anyone. But he did. He trusted me. And in doing that, he taught me how to live again. This place, I said, glancing around, isn't just about dogs. It's about second chances. It's about remembering that even when the world breaks you, healing is possible. And sometimes, I added, looking down at Echo, the ones who heal us don't speak our language. They just stay. For a moment, the wind stopped. Then applause broke, long, genuine, raw. Echo didn't react, of course. He just leaned against my leg and looked up at me with those steady brown eyes that said everything words couldn't. Over the months that followed, Echo Haven became more than I could have dreamed. We built a small clinic on-site, a training yard shaded by old mesquite trees, and even a quiet room, a place for trauma dogs to rest with soft music and low light. Caleb painted murals on the walls, dogs running through open fields, children laughing, a soldier kneeling beside his canine partner. In one corner he painted Titan, in another, Echo. Sometimes I'd stand there alone at night looking at those two faces, one from my past, one from my present, and think how strange life is. How grief, when shared, can turn into something beautiful. Not long after we opened, a letter arrived addressed to Captain Logan Pierce in Canine Echo. Inside was a photo of a woman in uniform holding a shepherd that looked a lot like Echo, only younger. The note read, "I was Kilo's handler before the San Diego raid. They told me he didn't make it. I guess they were wrong. Thank you for bringing him home for both of us. Sergeant Mark Davis." I must have read that note a dozen times. Then I folded it neatly and placed it on the memorial wall at the back of Echo Haven next to Titan's old tag. Echo sniffed the spot once, then sat beside me, pressing against my leg. "You found your way home after all," I said quietly. He wagged his tail once. The seasons shifted. The desert bloomed and bloomed again. Some dogs found new homes. Some stayed. We buried a few beneath the old mesquite tree out back, each with a small stone marker. Caleb called it Valor's Garden. I thought that was fitting. Every evening when the sun set behind the Franklin Mountains, I'd sit on the porch with Echo. He was older now, the gray around his muzzle a little thicker, his movements slower, but his spirit never faded. He'd rest his head on my knee, and I'd talk like I always did, about the past, about the future, about the silence between. Sometimes Harper would join us with 2 beers and a smile that carried more history than she'd ever admit. Other nights it was just me and Echo listening to the wind move through the desert. A few weeks ago, a young reporter came by to do a story about the sanctuary. She asked what kept me going after everything I'd seen after war loss pain. I told her the truth. I stopped believing in miracles a long time ago, I said. But then I met one. He had 4 legs, a scar on his shoulder, and a heartbeat stronger than mine. She smiled. That's beautiful. What's your message to people watching? I looked out toward the yard where the dogs were running free tails high against the red horizon. Sometimes saving a life starts with a bark, I said. Sometimes God doesn't send angels with wings. He sends them with paws and a broken past. That night after everyone left, I sat outside long after the lights went out. The desert sky was clear, full of stars, the kind you only see when the world goes quiet. Echo lay at my feet, snoring softly. I looked at him and smiled. You did it, buddy, I whispered. You saved more lives than I ever could. He stirred, opened one eye, then laid his head back down. The wind brushed across the sand, carrying the scent of sage and rain. And somewhere out in that vast, silent desert, I could almost hear Titan's bark echo through the night, strong, distant, eternal. I closed my eyes and let the sound wash over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't haunted. I was home.